Od STARMUSu cez vesmír až po muziku. Veda nás obklopuje na každom kroku. Vítajte pri Vedátorskom podcaste, v ktorom sa budeme rozprávať o vede a prírode okolo nás. Moje meno je Jozef.
A ja som Samuel.
Tento podcast vychádza v spolupráci so SME. A teraz prejdeme do angličtiny, lebo tu máme zase výborného hostia, ktorý nás znova navštívil. Ide o Davida. David, how are you?
Very well. It's really nice to be with you guys again. You look just like you did the last time.
Oh,
it's good to be
back. A little bit better, I hope.
Your eyesight is getting worse.
Okay. David, we are here recording this podcast episode. Thank you for having time for us. About something we teased last time when you have been in Bratislava, the STARMUS. The stars and music collided in Bratislava for 1 week and created unforgettable festival or meeting of minds, or how would you describe this?
I think it's all of those things. This is the creation over the last 12 years or so of two friends here who are really special guys. Garrick Israelian, who's an astronomer in the Canary Islands, and his pal, who he collaborated with on the sounds of the cosmos some years ago, Brian May, who is a PhD astrophysicist and also a pretty good guitarist.
Never heard of him.
So they're the co-directors. Garrick is a director, and they're the co-founders of STARMUS. And then a few of us others are privileged enough to be on the board with them and kind of steer this big enterprise. And it is for stars and music, STARMUS. So, as Brian says, we like to use both halves of the brain. There's the analytical half with the sciences, which are all represented here, and then having some fun with that creative half with music and with the arts as well. So It brings all that stuff together really in a unique way. I think we've had 55 speakers this time, and we had a nice star party. We'll talk about some of the things that we did, this year. And so you really can't get this kind of an experience at this level with all these great minds who are here this week, except with STARMUS, and it's really makes us proud to be here in Slovakia with you guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because today is the 5th day of STARMUS.
Yeah,
well, 6th.
Everyone everyone is becoming overwhelmed by the experience, a little bit tired. But I made a picture of you yesterday. This is a good picture because you're always sitting in the first row, straight back, and just with a face of fascination and excitement. More of this. So
I hope this will never end.
So can you speak a little about your fascination and where do you get the energy to be so amazed?
Well, I think we have to accept the fact that during STARMUS, we're willing to get less sleep than human beings should really be, required to get.
And scientists recommend.
Exactly, yeah. So I think next week there'll be a recovery week. But it's just overwhelming because we've got from 2 o'clock on until just about dinner time or so, the early evening, many lectures, and it's really overwhelming. We've got astronaut explorers. Charlie Duke was here from the Apollo days even, and Chris Hadfield and others, and many astronomers and astrophysicists talking about that specialty. That's kind of how STARMUS started, and then we have all the sciences represented. I know you're going to talk to Catherine Hayhoe as well, other climate scientists. This is STARMUS Earth, the theme this year, so we really emphasized, as the old saying goes, Earth is a planet too. We forget, to think of it in planetary terms because we're walking around on it all the time. But we do need to take care of Earth, and not just for us here with the what we're doing, with the planet, but for many, many, many generations to come, we hope. And then, of course, we have all this great entertainment. We kicked off the whole thing on Sunday with a gigantic concert with Jean-Michel Jarre, the great French keyboard electronic musician, and Brian as well.
That one was crazy, yeah.
Yeah, and boy,
so many people. Do you have numbers on that?
I don't know absolutely, but I heard that there were a lot of people actually outside the stadium area.
We were standing on the highway.
Is that right? Yeah. So I think, I really have no idea. I don't have authentication.
Okay.
But I heard it was, 25 or 30,000
it was tens of thousands.
Yeah, in there.
City officials said they are prepared for 30,000 people.
Yeah.
So I think it may exceeded that.
Wow, that's a lot.
Because
of people.
there were a lot of people everywhere, like everywhere when you look.
Yeah. So that was, as you guys saw, that was great fun and amazing music. And, we had a whole lot of, lasers and fireworks and everything going on there. I think they had more fireworks there, than you see in Washington, D.C. on July 4th back in America, So that was pretty impressive.
Saying something
about it. Right. So they didn't hold back, opening the festival.
They didn't hold it back.
And you're right. I mean, it's just this kind of tug of war. There's so much good stuff to listen to and so much great detail, so much wisdom that we're hearing from all these speakers, that it's almost overwhelming every day, and we kind of have to recover and, oh my God, here's another day coming, and we have to get ready for it. And if we're lucky, we'll be totally, completely exhausted, by the end of, today and tomorrow morning to where we can really recover, but so full of information and the friendships and getting together and getting to know all these really smart and fun people. You just get that in a special way.
Yes.
And it's interesting because this is something people don't often see. Like, yes, there are lectures since 2 to 6, but before lectures, you guys have media interviews and so on. So it's like not from 2 until 6, it's from the breakfast until probably
it's really all
late night discussions.
People only see the public side when there is some kind of public program, but you are from 7 a.m. until late at night working. It
is a kind of a relentless assault all day long, and we've gone, quite a number of us have gone and given talks about various subjects aside from the main program at schools around the country, and so on as well. I've given a Galaxies talk on a field trip a couple days ago, and so there's a lot of kind of bringing science to the people out there and to students that happens with STARMUS. And then, of course, a lot of things happen. There was just a contract signed for the next STARMUS yesterday. So there's a lot of kind of,
can you share where?
It's going to be in Indonesia.
Okay.
Bali,
Bali, okay.
So that's going to
So you want to serve a little bit.
Yeah. So that'll be a big deal coming down the road here.
Wow,
and then we've got,
And it's next year or in 2 years?
I think it's going to be next year.
Wow.
Yeah,
so another big undertaking.
Yeah. And then we've got eclipses coming in 2026 and 2027.
Okay.
Have you seen the previous one?
Yeah, I was just actually, the one that just happened, I was in Dallas, Texas.
So you're
lucky one.
In the States, and Celestron, a big telescope company, was there with us with all sorts of telescopes, and this was at Love Field, one of the old, smaller airport at Dallas now, right down in the city. And also we had the Weather Channel, which is a United States television station there with us. So we were broadcasting the eclipse live, narrating the eclipse as it was happening on television. I think they said that there were 21.5 million people watching the broadcast during totality there, and it was just abysmal. We were, hiding in our coffee and putting our head down. The morning of the eclipse, it was completely overcast, socked in, and believe me, I've seen 2 of the 13 total eclipses I've seen. You saw the clouds darken, for a couple minutes and then brighten again, That's not a good way to see an eclipse, so I was hoping that wasn't the third one. And miraculously, as things were coming up from the south, there's this huge, kind of vertical window that opened. We saw the whole eclipse. Wow. And it looked just horrible early that morning, So we got very lucky in Dallas there.
Next 2 of the next ones will be in Europe, in Spain.
We've got Spain in 26, and then the one that really...
That's really close.
That's really close. Northern Spain, the sun will be relatively close to the horizon. So it'll be like between 5 and 10 degrees up, depending on where you are. So it'll be a really different looking total eclipse.
Oh, so it won't be over our heads or something, but really low.
That's right. In Texas, it was 60 degrees. It was really high.
Yeah.
This time from Spain, it's going to be quite low, but that'll be, make really dramatic photos that people can take. And then the coolest eclipse for the rest of our life, you guys are younger than I am, but the rest of everyone's life who's alive now, coming August 2nd, 2027, that's going to be over, among other places, over Egypt. So we're planning an expedition. You'll be able to see the total eclipse, which will be more than 6 minutes of totality.
Wow.
Over the Temple of Luxor in Egypt. Then after the eclipse, go across the river and see the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. That's going to be hard to top. And in Egypt...
There are no clouds.
You have about a 98% chance of a photometrically clear sky. Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be the real
that would be an act of God if it would be overcast.
Right. That's really bad luck if it's cloudy in Luxor.
That's a curse of a pharaoh.
Tutankhamen. You're not going to see an eclipse on my watch.
If I could ask you...
where can we sign in for the expedition?
We want to sign.
I don't want to be a commercial guy here, but our magazine actually is running a trip, so you can check, astronomy.com, about that.
I hope you will email us.
Yeah. Well, I'll be there. And actually, the very famous... chief of antiquities in Egypt, this fellow Zahi Hawass will be there as well, with our group and a couple of others. So, he's kind of the demigod of Egyptian antiquities, very famous guy, So that'll be an adventure.
I will probably book that one.
Yeah, we'll be happy to have it.
Sounds amazing.
I will forget about it like 10 times, but then again, refinding, the ticket and again.
It's going to be warm, in, Luxor in August. That's going to be the only.
I have been there in August. It's really hot.
Yeah. But, for an eclipse, I'll take it.
And it will be colder during the eclipse, right?
Yeah.
Like you can feel it.
Little shade.
And even in Dallas, not such a hot place, but I mean, within, 10, 15 seconds, you could feel the temperature just immediately drop. I think, I don't know because we were talking on television, we didn't have, I wasn't paying attention to it, but it felt to me like it dropped maybe like about 15 degrees, 20 degrees, and then of course, warmed up very quickly after.
And now imagine those ancient civilizations, then just suddenly you feel, the chill and everything, and it's dark.
And you are not sure that it will stop someday.
It's amazing. I mean, from the days of Johannes Kepler, we've known precisely, about planetary orbits. But even when you count to, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you see first the diamond ring, and I mean, people cry, they get emotional. It's really amazing that you can see this alignment.
It's otherworldly experience.
It's so larger than our ordinary life on Earth. It just really hits people. It's quite something to see.
And we are lucky with the moon size and position, so maybe there will be...
Hey, 600 million years from now, we're out of luck. No more eclipses. Total eclipses.
Total eclipses.
This is the ad for the trip. One of the last of the...
So you need to book
limited stock of
between
eclipses.
now and 600 million years from now is the urgency.
See the eclipse. The stock is limited.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not everybody will see it again. Okay, I will take us back to STARMUS in Bratislava. Sorry, I would love to talk about eclipses in Egypt and in Bali and so on. But
you can see what happens when you get three crazy guys together.
If you could just pinpoint 3 like your best moments of STARMUS in Bratislava. Could you do that for us?
You know, it's so amazing. I think the first day we had these climate change talks, and that's so important. You know, they weren't all happy. You know, I mean, here's what we really need to do before we really reach a tipping point. And you know, what happens to us is one thing, but, you know, are we going to have people who are in a good place on Earth, you know, 100 or 500 or 10,000 generations from now? That's what we need to try to be thinking about, because what's happening with the carbon dioxide and methane also is really bad now. So I think those talks were really critically important. To hear Jane Goodall, who is here, and she's on our board now, lead off really the whole festival and talk about her experience as a scientist. And, you know, she's the world's leading authority, of course, on chimpanzees and, you know, what we
and also
know.
on kindness. She has 2 prizes.
Exactly. I mean, she's really a very special human being, and it's hard not to be just amazed by what she says, you know. And then, I mean, there's a whole gamut of, you know, of the world's experts really here. We talked about the climate change folks a little bit, Catherine Hayhoe. Kip Thorne is here and spoke with his artist friend, Leah Holloran, you know, and they've produced a book and so on. He's the world's leading authority, among other things, on black holes, which are fascinating, you know, and was an advisor on the movie Interstellar. You know,
I would say more than an advisor. Basically, he came up with the idea. And
yeah. So hearing him talk about, you know, there's the sci-fi of black holes, and I don't want to be a downer here, guys, but then there's the reality of black holes, and, you know, using them to travel, you know, to other places, and it's rough because you know, it'd be, you know, once you get into a black hole and you're at the singularity, it's going to ruin your whole weekend. It doesn't really matter where you come out, you know, after that. If you're a string of protons 10 kilometers long, right?
It doesn't sound really friendly.
Not a good way to start off the new week, you know. Yeah, okay. So, but I mean, hearing, you know, from him on that was always an incredible highlight. Charlie Duke, who has talked to us about, you know, wandering around on the moon, you know, which is quite something to hear from these guys before we get more people back to the moon, we hope, is always special. But instead of Apollo 16, this time Charlie talked about Artemis and where we are with the next generation of lunar exploration, and maybe on to Mars as well afterward. So that was really great, from one of the, you know, most entertaining. I mean, there are only 4 moonwalkers who are left with us here, and he's one of them. So that's really special. You know, he's really a treasure, and you know, just hearing, you know, the rock and roll. I mean, you know, the Sonic Universe concert. The guys playing, you know, Brian joining them. You know, that's, you know, it's such a special treat, because that doesn't really happen much at small groups like this, unless you're in a stadium and have a Queen ticket normally, you know. So those are some of the things that stood out, but there's so many, you know. We've heard from chemists and physicists and about lasers and about, you know, all sorts of, you know, biologists as well, and you know, figuring out DNA and the human genome, and, you know, it's just really a great kind of snapshot look, STARMUS, at what's happening in all these sciences, and things are so rapidly evolving. One of the things I've gotten interested in kind of as a hobby, because I had an ancestor and some stuff handed down to me, is, you know, is American history, the Civil War, you know, and that kind of big event that redefined America.
I know your email address. So.
Yeah. Lincoln. You can tell which side my guys were on. The good side. Yeah, okay. But
South?
But anyway, you know, that's a fixed event. Yeah, we can talk, and, you know, there are millions of papers to read and look into and so on, but that's an event that's over. The sciences, as you guys know, I mean, the evolution of changing thought, you know, we've learned, just as astronomy is one example, we've learned enough in the last 40 years, in some ways, to equal what had happened before that 40 years, from the time of Galileo up to 40 years ago. The volume, the flux of new information of how these things are are changing is so rapid, and astronomy is not unique. It's happening pretty much in all the sciences.
For me, the best comparison is how many exoplanets we are finding now compared to 30 years ago was the first exoplanet. Yeah. Like then it was rarity and it was like unthinkable to find another. And today we have, I don't think, tens or hundreds of exoplanets every day found.
That's right. And we have something on the order of 5,500 that we know of now. But that's another great speaker. We had Michelle Mayor. I can't remember now. It's all a blur. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yesterday. But this is the same for me. I came home yesterday and I was like, what was I doing today?
It's just a blur.
There's just too much good stuff going on. It's a nice problem to have. Yeah. But, Michel, he discovered, of course, the first exoplanet 51 Pegasi b orbiting a sun-like star, in 1995 that really kind of cracked open the whole cottage industry, if you will, of exoplanetary discovery. So there's another kind of leading light of his field was here with us. So, but you're right. We're just exploding our knowledge of the Milky Way around us. Most of those exoplanets are relatively close to us.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find exoplanets outside Milky Way.
But presumably, by what we understand about how stars form, there are billions of solar systems, if you will, in the Milky Way.
This is something I learned just yesterday. The shift in the attitude towards this, like it was believed very improbable to form a planet.
Yes.
And then, what was it, 50 years ago, suddenly, and the estimate just orders of magnitude.
In the 1940s, it was that the understanding of how solar system, how debris around stars form really changed. And it became clear that we believe that, and the exoplanetary stuff bears this out, all protostars have orbiting disks of stuff around them that become planetary systems. Yeah. So we have a galaxy that's filled with maybe billions of solar systems. We don't know how many, maybe 200 billion or more. We've got at least, at a minimum, 100 billion galaxies in the universe. It's a big, big place. But, if one star, if the sun is the size of a pea, and it's placed in London, and then the nearest star is about the same size, just a tiny, imperceptibly bit larger, Alpha Centauri, that system, placed in Paris, all the rest of that between those cities on that scale is empty space. Most of the space out there is empty, and even the closest things to each other in a galaxy are a long way away from each other. So
when you think about how big is galaxy, just think about how far away galaxies are between each other.
Exactly. So we love our movies and having fun with sci-fi, but it is a very, very large place. And so life may be very abundant out there. Spectroscopy tells us that chemistry is the same everywhere in the cosmos, we believe. But, so there's nothing maybe that could be incredibly special about, even if you consider us advanced life, being out there in lots and lots of places. But the distance scale of the cosmos is so large that, we're not going to be having people land, and meet us, at the castle here in a UFO for dinner. But,
and if I can return to the first day, what I liked about it was the composition of talks and panels, because there were like Jane Goodall with her reason for hope, which was, like basically a motivational speech, but in a very good way.
Yeah.
Then Catherine Hayhoe with some data, with some plots and so on.
Yeah.
But then, for example, you had a panel discussion about atmospheric rivers, which was something I didn't know about and was very, very technical at that point.
Yeah.
So was this only by accident, or how was the program set up?
Well, Garrick is really the guy who arranges the order of the program, and he's contacting many of these people himself. And so, and I volunteered to host, and foolishly they accepted, So it's really kind of established thematically each day. And I didn't know much about, atmospheric rivers either, But it was kind of eye-opening to hear about how interconnected, of course, all the oceans are, and the movement of water and of temperature all around the globe, and the currents, and how that really affects things. And of course, we're in major trouble, in the oceans, with warming. Even a couple of degrees, is big trouble for coral reefs and all kinds of ecosystems. So that was sort of a panel discussion that came about rather quickly in development. But I think there were some very smart things that the panelists said, about.
We hope so.
Yeah,
but it nicely covered the whole spectrum, like from nearly motivational talks up to Stephen Chu, which was like finally data plots,
and I think we saw some different backgrounds and there's a cabinet official, Barack Obama's Secretary of Energy. I mean, this guy is at the highest levels in the United States of politics as well as science, and so he has a really definitive notion of what's happening with all these things. And I think there was a little bit of, disagreement on very minor levels with a couple of the speakers that he had about, no, this is kind of the way, it really is kind of a thing, So he had kind of a unique insight in some of the problems. And I think he believes that the situation is worse even, and more alarming than a couple of the comments that were made in some of the talks.
And do you think when those disagreements are being shown during the conference, is it good or bad? Because I think it's good that we show that, well, we are finding the right way and
the middle ground.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be inevitable because, science is a huge undertaking, and lots of groups are taking data and trying to come to conclusions and forecasting in this area what may likely be happening in the future. And, it's a self-correcting process, though. So as we learn more, we refine what we really believe to be true by, empiricism and by experimentation also. So I think there's always going to be some disagreement. And, in the old days in astronomy, people, back in the 1930s, people would stand up at the American Astronomical Society and say, you're totally wrong. Get out of here. We don't have anything like that going on. When it came
do you miss it?
Before I was around, like the early days of people thinking about what was responsible for what we now think of as dark matter. And we still don't know. But it's probably a subatomic particle, like the so-called axion. We haven't found them yet, and this is something that Fritz Zwicky and others thought about in the 1930s. Originally. So we're a long time coming with that, and of course with dark energy as well. The last 25 years of wondering what's dark energy made of. We don't know. If we can figure that out in this room, you guys, we can share a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, we are exactly free.
Deal? Yeah. Okay.
We will not leave this room until we figure it out.
Exactly. So I think there's always going to be some of that kind of minor disagreement, but the data and more observations and more work kind of refines those, and we get headed in the right direction toward a real true belief about some of this stuff. That's just, I think, how science works.
And there is a disagreement maybe how to interpret the data, but also in how to talk to people, because Catherine Hayhoe was very understanding and so on. And when I interviewed Stephen, I asked him let's end on a positive note. What is your and 3 sentences in, it was civilization collapse and everything. So
that's a positive note for somebody.
And he didn't say, but on the bright side after that sentence.
On the bright side, civilization will end.
It was great while it lasted. He said, okay, yuck.
But how to find the balance between, not underestimating the issue, but also not to, I don't want to scare people, but you know what. Because young people, after COVID, after war, now they have to find climate change, and they can feel overwhelmed. So how to communicate with them?
And a lot of people, sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of people are making wrong decisions. Like there is a groups that are disturbing not the politicians and people in charge, but the just normal people living their days like they are protesting against oil and so on. Yeah. And I don't really understand that point of view that we should complicate everybody's lives and they will come to our side. I think it's counterproductive. It's you are fighting for climate change, I will buy gasoline and burn it on my garden or something like that.
It's an incredible thing, and I have hope because my son and daughter-in-law are 30 now, and I think young people actually are going to be the people who get things going really in the right direction. I have a lot of hope for that because they understand and they're not sort of separated politically into these kind of tribes. The United States is a horrible example of this. I mean, maybe the worst among the accomplished nations, so to speak, in the world of tribalism. I mean, there are so many people who don't care about the evidence or what the real data show. They are
they're just standing their ground.
That's right. They're standing their ground, and it's like things were 100,000 years ago. I'm part of my group, and my friends and authority figures agree that this isn't that big a deal, and so I'm going to think that, and I'm not going to look into any kind of real information or change my mind. It's in the 100,000 years ago or 50 or whatever, you survived by being in this group of like thinkers and hunting and all this kind of stuff.
The opposite argument is a lot of groups died because they stood with their thinking and they didn't change.
That's right.
And we are only having the winner's bias or the survival bias, but not looking how many people died because they stuck on their thinking.
Exactly right. And I would say, that I would think that the ultra-conservative people who don't understand science, and this is not complicated stuff. Putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, warming the atmosphere, this is basically like second grade chemistry and physics. It's not really complicated.
It's not a string theory.
Right, exactly, yeah. But
you don't need to have any knowledge about dimensions or formulas or anything.
It's pretty straightforward, So, I think the people who are reactionary and won't go to the trouble of understanding this simple thing that's going on eventually will, diminish into the background because the younger people do understand this stuff and they do care, even coming from some of the places like in America, as an example, that are more conservative and even anti-science. So I have hope for the future. But, we don't have an infinite amount of time to do something about what we're doing to Earth for future generations. We do need to act in the next few years in a big way. And there are countries, China and India, that are just, blasting away with pollution, who are not on the program here cooperating with everyone
China
else.
is the worst criminal in this for me because they even signed they will stop creating another extra pollutions and so on. And they created even more pollution.
Right. Yeah.
And so on. And even their green initiatives turn out to be a lot of times fraudulent.
Right.
Or so on. So that's really alarming that biggest countries in terms of population and second biggest countries, or I don't know what place India holds in terms of GDP.
Right.
They are not thinking about the future of their people. They are thinking about their immediate gain.
That's exactly
and
right.
And that's really alarming for me.
It is very alarming. And it takes me back to some of our pals, the Apollo astronauts. Charlie Duke and Jim Lovell, who's in Chicago, who's still around, and Buzz Aldrin and others all talk about looking back at Earth, and you can when you're on the moon you can block out Earth with your thumb, but it's one blue marble and there are no political boundaries, it's one fragile, thin ecosystem that protects us, that we're monkeying with in a big way now. Apologies to Jane. Sorry. And you know, many politicians, you know, are holding on to power, and a lot of powerful people are interested in money. And, you know, there's no, you know, you don't see boundaries and nations separated looking at Earth. It's one system together, and we're only going to get the place in better shape by cooperating as one system. And so it is it's a terrible challenge. But, you know, we've got to do what we can do, because already there's big trouble afoot, you know, both in the atmosphere and in the oceans as well. And you know, we heard from Sylvia Earle, you know, who is a legendary giant in oceanography, you know, sort of akin to Jane, you know, in primatology. And you know, she gave a very inspiring speech as well this week about, you know, what's happening with the oceans, even over the last few decades in her lifetime, you know. So that's really big trouble for the future if we don't help to protect the health of the oceans and all the life that exists down there.
And to return back to STARMUS, you mentioned Sylvia, she got the Hawking Medal.
Yes.
So what is the Hawking Medal?
So the Stephen Hawking Medal, Stephen Hawking was on our board, and maybe, you know, you could argue that he was the smartest guy on the planet for many years there. Brilliant, you know, physicist and cosmologist, and one of the great thinkers about the origin and fate of the universe and black holes, with his best friend Kip, who's here, and all that stuff. And of course, we lost him very sadly, you know, a few years ago now. But the medal is in honor of Stephen and is given for science communication as an honor each year. And so we gave one to Sylvia and one to Laurie Anderson and a couple of others here as well. David Attenborough, who's now who wasn't
heard
here.
that name before.
Yeah. You might have heard of him. Yeah, he's Sir David.
And Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, and Christopher Nolan, exactly. Yeah, with his many films, Interstellar and others. And David now is 98 years old and is doing fine, but you know, wasn't traveling here, you know, of course, and set a film. But what a, you know, who's who of people to honor for what they've done for spreading the knowledge of real information about our world to the public in a big way. Yeah.
And communicating with public is very important. Once I asked Chris Hadfield whether he believes the science he has done on the space station is more important than the outreach. And he skews toward the outreach, because at one point, for example, he connected to, what was it, 600,000 or 700,000 students. And if 1% of them now become engineer, scientist, something, it just blows up in a couple of decades. So.
Yeah. And nobody's better than Chris at communicating the excitement of science and of space exploration and his unique career, you know, as an engineer and an astronaut, and what he's done, you know, is unbelievable. And hey, you know, he's the best guitar player in space, too. Yeah, you know, that's
some Russian guy. Wait a minute.
He played his famous rendition the other day of Space Oddity, the Bowie song again, you know, for us, which Chris does very nicely.
It was amazing. Yeah.
I've got goosebumps during that. Also during the Interstellar, played by Philharmonic. Oops.
Oh, and you know, I don't want to hijack the conversation here, but you know, I didn't realize what was going to happen there, you know, but the orchestra playing these space-related themes, you know, they started with the 2001, you know, which is very, you know, so iconic, but at the end, I'd never heard the Star Wars theme played live. It was so loud and majestic, and, you know, marching, that was overwhelming almost, you know. So that was just I didn't see that coming, but that was amazing to hear that orchestral music with all the space themes. Yeah.
And for people who don't know what we are talking about, this was for STARMUS for schools, which take place at the same venue. But
and there were 3,500 kids in there, packed in there, to hear talks by several, including Jane and Chris, and this great mini concert, that followed.
And I think this might have been the most impactful part of STARMUS.
Because as you said, how many of those kids will be inspired, and that's what's going to make this world a better place in the future. Yeah.
So, for example, this co-author of the book, Norby, he went to an observatory when he was young and then basically changed his life. And there are so many stories. You just need the one good experience, and sometimes that's enough to make one different decision, and then you go into...
Absolutely right. It's a spark. And, you know, my father was an organic chemist, and so I grew up around a chem lab at a university in a town in Ohio there and everything. But you never want to do exactly what your dad did. I didn't want to
something similar.
Yeah,
not exactly.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Then you're cool, but not that cool.
So I was but hang it. So I was thinking maybe I'd be a physician or whatever. Well, I was 14. I went to a star party just by accident, and a dark sky, small town, university town, and you know the fact that you could walk out of a house just out into a yard. There was a little 6-inch Newtonian reflector set up. And look at Saturn and see the golden orange, globe and rings of Saturn. You can just go out and see all this stuff yourself, live photons coming. My mind was blown. I was immediately hooked on this stuff. And, that happening to kids is really what this, it's the gospel of astronomy, if you will, and of taking care of each other, because it's the fact that we're made of not just atoms like atoms from stars, but literally the same atoms recycled into our bodies that we're creating, exactly as Carl Sagan, our old pal, used to say, we're made of stardust. It's practically miraculous that we can be sentient and sitting and talking here with each other, and the light stuff, the hydrogen and helium and so on, resulted from Big Bang nucleosynthesis early on, but most of the stuff we're made of came from the deaths of low mass or high mass stars or the collisions of neutron stars. So it's really unbelievable.
For me, this is also extremely unbelievable. And a lot of people say, why do you care about exploration or scientific approach and so on? And I always tell them one thing, that I think human race was created by universe to look on, universe looking at itself, and its life is against entropy.
Right. And
locally.
The bummer is that eventually entropy is going to win, but we can hold it off for a long while at least.
Yeah, but a lot of life can hold a lot of entropy.
So you're already planning the next STARMUS.
Yeah.
If you can talk to Garik and tell him, well, maybe invite this person or maybe open this topic, what would it be? Who is the interesting person we are missing
that's
here?
That's a good question. Oh boy, I don't know that I know offhand. I'd have to think about that.
Everybody.
This is part of the problem, and why the number of speakers have grown is that the people who get involved with STARMUS, they want to do this, until the sun becomes a red giant. They want to come back and back, and so kind of the STARMUS.
Just wait how many people will come to Bali.
So, I mean, the kind of STARMUS family, if you will, grows over time, and people want to come back and speak again. And, there's Bali and there's these eclipse destinations and stuff. So it's hard, increasingly hard to find, will we have 100 speakers in, 10 years? Maybe, but we don't want it to get so big that we lose that intimacy.
Yeah, of course.
You can talk to, Garik and Brian and, Charlie Duke and Jane, and that if it gets to be so big that we lose that intimacy, it's not going to be good for the festival.
So can let some of those go.
But that's a good question. I think after this week, Garik will disappear for 2 months and recover.
I don't blame him after this.
And then we'll start talking about all this stuff 2 months from now, for next year.
Well-deserved rest.
But maybe my recommendation would be Sean Carroll. Because he's doing cosmology, cosmological constant, and also fundamental quantum mechanics, and also writing books. So
he's a very good writer. And that's means you're a good. Usually, almost always means you're a really good speaker too. If you're a very inspiring writer.
For me, amazing would be Brian Cox. Amazing speaker.
Brian has been with us before.
I know.
But he hasn't, and we've had Neil Tyson has been here, and Brian Greene is here. Will be, I believe, today speaking. I think.
I hope he's going.
Because
I brought his book. So.
Yeah. He better show up. Yeah,
he better show up.
I think he's on the program today.
He's the last session today.
He is. Yeah.
Actually, last talk.
Yeah.
It's like the
last
until the end of time is the title of the talk.
He's the finale.
Like
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
I cannot imagine better finale than until end of time.
Ending with a bang.
Yeah, until the end of time. Can he do that in 20 minutes? That's covering a lot of time, you know.
He won't stop. To be continued.
Some lecturers went over time a little.
Yeah. Well, and they told us, you know, if Jane wants to talk from now until midnight, let her. You know,
but that's...
I spoke with her before her lecture for students.
Yeah.
And I was just making fun of her, like, are you nervous? And she was a little, because she didn't want to run overtime.
Ooh.
And I was like, no one is stopping you. Take as long time as you
run
need.
overtime. Yeah.
No force on earth can stop you. So.
Yeah, but it's a great group, and so we'll always look for additions and other.
So STARMUS, from what you are saying, even in future, it won't change into some really big thing that with hundreds and hundreds of speakers and lose its intimacy.
I don't think it can.
It will still be maybe the bigger on the aspect of the music and other things around it, but the speakers will be intense.
I think that's right.
Okay.
I think we don't want to have it become so big that it gets out, you know,
unwieldy,
out of hand, you know, or it wouldn't be the same. And so I think it'll always have that kind of magic of a special event where you can talk to all these folks, you know, if you'd like to, you know. I mean, there are people down, you know, having breakfast, you know, with, I mean, you know, Simon Phillips was down there, you know, one of the greatest drummers in the world, you know, sitting down and catching up with him. He's a race car driver and all kinds of things, you know. So they're really interesting people who you can interact with here. And I think if it gets too big, we lose that, and we don't want to do that. Yeah.
Great. So thank you for organizing the event.
Yeah, well, we cannot thank you even for Bratislava. We thank you in her stead.
Actually, Bratislava is her in Slovak language.
Yeah. So, okay, I hope we will catch up in near future together,
course.
David.
Of course.
Maybe. You are always welcome in Slovakia.
I've already, people have shamed me and said you have to come back and see the things that you haven't seen. So, and I love it. You know, it's
and let us know. We'll organize a seminar somewhere and a public lecture. So
excellent.
We can go to the mountains or.
I'd love it.
Like that.
I'd love it. Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
And you will get a lot more sleep, I promise.
As even astronomers do need to sleep a
little bit. Just a little bit. Okay, thank you very much for listening to us. You can find us on every app that plays podcasts, and we will see you in other episodes. See you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Volám sa Zuzana Kovačič-Hanzelová a v živote som mala šťastie. Narodila som sa do podmienok, v ktorých je všetko nastavené na úspech. Aj preto som pre vás pripravila spolu s Kristínou Paholík-Hamárovou minisériu Odsúdený na neúspech o téme generačnej chudoby, vylúčených komunít a systéme, vďaka ktorému sú 100 000 ľudí odsúdení na neúspech. Nájdete nás na Sme.sk aj vo všetkých podcastových aplikáciách.